Hello, listeners. How are you doing? Wherever you are, I salute you in the name of Africa, and I pray that from this interaction we may be blessed and understand few things that will help guide us in what we are doing. You are welcome to this edition of my Liberation Gospel. And you've seen my title today, Are African Pastors Revolutionary as Jesus Christ? I decided to take up this topic with certain things in my mind. But before I present my thesis, I want us to understand certain things. Whether you are a Christian or not, you may be interested in the highlights of my thesis. I will not go full deep, because if we start talking about what I have in mind, it will take us days. But first of all, Christianity, we do understand actually what is Christianity. Following Christ, the followers of Christ are called Christians, and the religion is Christianity. In as much as I've always said that my ancestors from where I come from in Africa do know God. They have always prayed to God in heaven. But the coming of full modern day Christianity rose from today's Middle East, with how Jesus Christ was born and so forth, around I should say 4 BCE, and crucified by Pontius Pilate. between 23 to 33 CE. If you're a historian, you know how to calculate. But first of all, some of us may not understand, how did Christianity come to spread? First of all, it's spread from where Jesus, around where Jesus was born in today's Israel, up to where it's fully expanded. Should be in Rome. Then Rome was the center of the world, when they had a sprawling empire, the Roman Empire. So from there, it spread. But before it spread, Christians, the early Christians, it was like a cult group. It was very quiet because there was persecution. This was a religion that believed in Jesus Christ and his actions and what he preached. But first of all, how did this religion endure? How was it endeared to the world? Especially, there are certain class of people that first embraced Christianity, that made it very attractive, though it was terrible at that time, in the sense that early Christians were persecuted, many were killed. If you read the history of the spread of Christianity, it was terrible then. But it was embraced. It was embraced by the lower class of people. It was embraced by the outcasts. It was embraced by those that the society ostracized. Because Christianity, the real Christianity, actually embraced everyone. It preached an egalitarian society. It preached a society that doesn't have a social stratification. I mean, it preached a classless society, not a society whereby there's a big man and there's a poor man. And that attracted many to the preachings of Jesus Christ. So why did I ask this question? My research question, what I want to highlight today, are African pastors revolutionary as Jesus Christ? Because a lot of things have happened. Many of us have always identified following or the gospel of Jesus Christ as a white man's religion. That how can we follow the religion of the white man? But it is important for us to still know that it is important for us to understand what did Jesus Christ really preached. Are today's pastors preaching his gospel? What are they preaching? Many of us don't really look at the Bible, closely. We depend on our men of God, our daddies and our mommies, to interpret the Bible for us or to tell us, like the usual lazy humans, on the things that are important. We don't embark on them if it has a narrow path. But if it has a wider path, we will embark on that. So, and I said, Jesus Christ, to me, from my research point of view, was a revolutionary. He lived a revolutionary life. He lived a revolutionary life from his birth. From his birth, if you are conversant with the Bible, whether as a theologian or non-theologian or as a critic, you see from his birth until his death, it was a life of a revolutionary. Jesus Christ, when he was born, it was tough. We saw how he survived. Herod tried to kill him. We saw the wise men coming from the east to pay obeisance and homage. We saw how Herod tried to trace where his nativity took place to the wise men, but they fooled Herod. We saw how many kids were killed because of the fact that Jesus Christ was being hunted. We equally learned from the same Bible how his parents took him away and hid him until it was time to return. follow the steps and the growth of Jesus Christ. Even at 12, his parents took him for the Passover feast. We saw how he meandered. He left his parents and went to the temple and even engaged the educated at that time. It was very radical. Many of it will be very rare today to see kids doing that sort of thing. So the revolutionary step of Jesus Christ started from his birth. And as such, it is important for us to take a look, for us to begin to research on ourselves. We'll take a sober reflection. Today's so-called men of God or pastors, are they following the steps of Jesus Christ? Even the Bible we profess that we read as Christians, those that we read about in the Bible, the prophets, the Elijahs, the Elishas, the Nehemiahs, Hosea, Isaiah, all the prophets in the Bible, how did they live their life? They were revolutionaries. They stood for the people. They fired against the status quo. They were fearless. And that was how Jesus Christ lived his life. Are these pastors really preaching Jesus Christ? I mean, there are highlights of my thesis, but I'm going to look closely from a section of the Bible in Matthew. If you have one Bible, you can just check it, find a way. Matthew chapter 23. I'm going to present my thesis with a very important verbal tirade of Jesus Christ against the status quo then and against the powers that be. Why I say Jesus Christ was a revolutionary, we saw all through his life what he did. He stood for the common good of the common man. In the sense that what is happening in the African continent today, we have churches scattered all over the continent, from the Southern African region to West Africa to East Africa. I don't want to get into the North Africa. There are still churches in North Africa. We have churches scattered all over the places, yet our people are in bondage. Too many churches, yet those piloting and setting up these churches cannot stand for the people. And I keep asking, what are they really preaching? If they are preaching that Jesus Christ stood for the people and died for his people, what are they preaching? If they cannot challenge the status quo, if they cannot begin to represent the people, if they cannot preach the gospel of that Jesus Christ, which was revolutionary, then what they are doing is balderdash. But it is important for us to remind ourselves that the happenings today is a wake-up call. It's a wake-up call for everyone to reset their brains, for us to carry out not only an economic and political revolution, but a religious revolution. Because I've always believed that the most important thing, Africa has always been a religious place, and the religion is very important for man. In as much as Karl Marx says religion is the opium of the masses, he defined his thesis on religion being the opium of the masses by saying the exploitation of Christianity or following the gospel. That exploitation has always been the bane of man. That exploitation drove Europeans to the shores of Africa and into the hinterland, bringing the gospel of Jesus Christ with one. That was why, Archbishop Tutu said they brought the Bible. that they brought the Bible with one hand. When we took the Bible, they took our land. It is important to remind ourselves that the same tactics that the European missionaries came with to Africa is the same tactics, the same our today's pastors are using. And that is exploitation of the faithful. You will see most of them, instead of them preaching the radical gospel of Jesus Christ, they are building empires. Churches have turned to business centers. There are many, and these are the things Jesus Christ preached against during his time. Most of you are aware what the Bible tells us when he came into the temple, where the Pharisees and the Sadducees have turned to money spending centers, doing commercial sleaze. And as at that time, the temple, the money changers then, they were in control of Israel's economy, doing commercial sleazes and deals in the temple. When Jesus Christ came into the temple, what did he do? You brood of vipers, you've turned my father's house into... That is the same thing that is happening today. Why are we still in bondage? And you look at many, it's a new culture of not understanding God again, not believing in God again, keep rising because of the new Pharisees and Sadducees we do have. First, it is important to understand the character of Jesus as a revolutionary. I've said when he was born, the circumstances surrounding his birth, how he survived, even when he was a kid, his parents going for Passover, how he meandered and went to the temple. We saw that. Then, when he started his missionary activities, if you look at the disciples of Jesus Christ, how he picked them one by one, you will see that he had Simon the Zealot. And what does it mean to be a zealot then? To be a zealot is a revolutionary. Simon the Zealot, he was, well, because during the period of Jesus Christ, when he came on earth, the Jews were under the Roman authority, the Roman Empire. Pontius Pilate was a Roman governor. Today, Rome is in Italy. He was a Roman governor. And the Jews have always detested the Roman soldiers and Rome. Let us not delve into history. But it is important for us to understand that at that time, Rome was ruling over Jews or Palestine territories and Judea, because Pontius Pilate was the governor of Judea at that time. Simon was a zealot and he was a disciple of Jesus Christ. You remember James and John? James and John, if you read the Bible very well, you will see they are often referred as the sons of thunder. James and John, sons of thunder. What does it mean to be sons of thunder? And we remember at the Garden of Gethsemane, when Jesus Christ was about to be betrayed by Judas Iscariot, what did Simon do? What did Peter do? Simon Peter. Not only that time, in many occasions, Peter has always itched to fight. And what does that mean? That he even cut the ear of one of the soldiers that came to arrest Jesus Christ. Looking closely, or looking at the Bible from a critical point of view, some critics or some analysts have posited that one of the reasons that though this is not biblical, that one of the reasons that Judas Iscariot may have betrayed and sold Jesus to the authorities then was as a result of Jesus disappointing them, in the sense that he later understood that his kingdom was not of the world. That some of them, Jews, maybe particularly Judas, may have thought that Jesus Christ was this Messiah, as in the earthly Messiah that they were waiting for. Because the Jews have, according to their tradition, they've always waited for the Messiah, who will come with chariots to rescue them from bondage against the Roman authorities. Are African pastors revolutionary as Jesus Christ? Now, I want us to go to Matthew, because we've seen the life of Jesus Christ was all about opposing authorities who were against the people. And that was why he was very popular. During his time, his messages, he preached messages of hope to the people. In time of difficulties, in period of trouble and tribulations, he offered a message of hope. Are our pastors doing that today? We need to look at that, because you and I know that most of the pastors we have today, they are not doing that. They are so much afraid. They are business men. They are building empires. They are spreading churches, spreading their churches like businesses. How did Jesus Christ fare when he was on earth? What did he preach? Was he busy building gigantic buildings? We need to juxtapose his life with our so-called men of God today. And look at it. You will see that when you juxtapose it, you see that very few are preaching the real gospel. Because I've said it before, all the prophets in the Bible, all those that preached the gospel, they were revolutionaries. I mentioned about the prophets in the Old Testament. What about Paul, that wrote most of the New Testament? Paul was a revolutionary. Paul was going from one place to another, touring that part of the world, spreading his gospel. He was, to whom ox is called, he doesn't care. He went to prison. He stood for the people. He preached the message. He wasn't afraid. Our pastors today, are they afraid or not? In the circumstances we find today, can they stand up and tell the authorities, you are wrong? What you guys are doing are wrong, and damn the consequences? We need to begin to wake up, because one of the problems we do have is ignorance. We don't want to think. Now, I want us to go to, before I continue, to read chapter 23, Matthew chapter 23. I want you to bear with me, because it talks, woe unto you. I call it the 7 woes. I read from verse 1. He said, then spoke Jesus to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All therefore whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do, but do not according to their works. I want you to listen attentively. For they say and do not. For they bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne, and lay them on men's shoulder, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. But all their works they do to be seen of men. They make broad their phylacteries, and enlarge the borders of their garments, and love the uppermost places at feasts, and the chief seats in the synagogues, and greetings in the markets, and to be called men, to be called of men, Rabbi, Rabbi. I don't know if you do understand this. It talks about the hypocritical nature of the Pharisees then and the scribes, which we do have today. Daddy, daddy. Our pastors, everybody want to be, everybody, daddy, 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 father, father. But I continue from verse 8. But you be not called rabbi, for one is your teacher, even Christ, and all you are brothers. And call no man your father upon the earth, for one is your father, who is in heaven. Neither be you called masters, for one is your teacher, even Christ. But he that is greatest among you shall be your servant. I want you to pick that. But he that is greatest among you shall be your servant. And whosoever shall exalt himself shall be abased. And he that shall humble himself shall be exalted. Whosoever that exalts himself will be brought down. And he that humbles himself shall be exalted. But woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you shut up the kingdom of heaven against men. For you neither go in yourself, neither allow you them that are entering to go in. Did you listen to that? They are not going to heaven, and they don't want anybody to go in too. Because of there are 7 woes here. I'm going to talk about these woes. It is important for us to, because many of the preachings today, we are no longer looking at the life of Jesus Christ. Actually, how he lived, what he preached. We are now looking at our pastors, the way they dress, the way they live their life, the way they bamboozle us with oratorical progress. Many of them are good speakers, building businesses, companies. When they die, their children continue to run these churches like companies. We do understand that, don't we? I continue from 14. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayer. Therefore you shall receive the greater condemnation. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you compass sea and land to make one proselyte, and when he is made, you make him twofold more the child of hell than yourself. Woe unto you, you blind guides, who say, whosoever shall swear by the temple, it is nothing. But whosoever shall swear by the gold of the temple, he is bound. You fools and blind, for which is greater, the gold or the temple that sanctifies the gold? And whosoever shall swear by the altar, it is nothing. But whosoever swears by the gift that is upon it, he is bound. You fools and blind, for which is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifies the gift? Whoever therefore shall swear by the altar swears by it, and by all things thereon. And whoever shall swear by the temple swears by it, and by him who dwells therein. I hope you are with me. I want you to listen to this, because we are going to analyze some of these things. Jesus Christ is bemoaning the castigated the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And many of you know about the Pharisees. The Pharisees, they are the liturgical experts, those who have the PhDs of the Jewish religion, Judaism. Today, the men of God, they have PhDs and big degrees. They own churches. They think that many of them think that they hold the key to the kingdom of God. You will see women, they no longer listen to their husbands. They listen to their pastors more. These pastors from pulpits, they control the lives of men. Yet, the society is in trouble. Yet, they cannot stand up for people that are held in bondage by the government of the day. What did Jesus Christ do? The highlight of Jesus' ministry on when he was on earth was crucifixion, that he was crucified. Is it not the salvation that is supposed to be preached? That Jesus Christ was crucified on the cross for the people, both those who love and those who doesn't love him. And that is the ultimate sacrifice. How many of our pastors can sacrifice today for their people? In times of troubles, even many of the churches today, you see a lot of people in the church, they cannot even cater for themselves. Yet, most of these churches keep building companies. Let us finish reading this before I continue. Starting from verse 18, I'm reading Matthew chapter 23, from verse 1, then continue from 18. And whosoever shall swear by the altar, it is nothing, but whosoever swears by the gift that is upon it, he is bound. You fools and blind, for which is greater, the gift or the altar that sanctifies the gift? Whoever therefore shall swear by the altar swears by it, and by all things thereon. And whoever shall swear by the temple swears by it, and by him who dwells therein. And he that shall swear by heaven swears by the throne of God, and by him who sits thereon. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you pay tithes of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faith. This ought you to have done, and not to leave the other undone. You blind guides, who strain out a gnat and swallow a camel. I don't know if you understood this, but we will come to that. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you make clean the outside of the cup and of the platter, but within they are full of extortion and excess. You blind Pharisee, cleanse first that which is within the cup and platter, that the outside of them may be clean also. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you are like unto withered sepulchres, which indeed appear beautiful outwardly, but are within full of dead. But within full of dead men's bones and of all uncleanness. Even so, you also outwardly appear righteous unto men, but within you are full of hypocrisy and iniquity. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! Because you build the tombs of the prophets, and adorn the sepulchres of the righteous, and say, if we had been in the days of our fathers, we would not have been partakers with them in the blood of the prophets. Therefore, you are witnesses unto yourselves that you are the children of them who killed the prophet. Fill you up then the measure of your fathers. In this Matthew 23, I read from 1 to 32. Jesus summarizes what was happening then, and it is still happening today. The same issue is what is happening today. The same. Now, let us look at, summarize these woes. I call it the 7 woes to the scribes and Pharisees. And with that, you summarize the hypocrisy of what is going on. Because most of our problems could still be sorted if our men of God and even our pastors who can stand up for the people that many of them depend on. Now let's go. Jesus first talked about to the crowds and his disciples, the scribes and the Pharisees sit on Moses' seat. So do you, and observe whatever they tell you, but not the works they do. For they preach, but do not practice. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to move them with their fingers. We see that with what is happening. They make laws, but the laws are not for them. We saw that with many African countries. We see our leaders. They make laws, but they don't want to follow the laws. They want us to follow the laws, but they don't want to follow the laws themselves. The laws are meant for us, not for them. Before I continue, it is important for us to understand Jesus Christ as a revolutionary. Because if those preaching about him, those who have made a name preaching about him and his gospel, if they can stand up for the rights of the people, I think our problem will begin to be sorted. If they, our so-called leaders, most of them still attend the same church we do attend. They sit in front of the churches. We've seen that. They are offered, even some of them come into the church, they will be given time to address church members. They will be given that special preferences to address church members. There will be special seats will be placed in front of the church for them. But unfortunately, our men of God cannot be bold enough and courageous enough to tell them what you people are doing is bad. What did Elijah do? Instead, look at what is happening today. Churches today are like businesses. The pastors are protecting their members like they protect customers. They are quarreling with each other because of their customers. In the real sense of it, if you are preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ, will you be more interested in your customers? Will you be more interested in expanding your business interests? Evangelism is important, but it is done, the way it is done now, it's more or less like companies. It is more or less like companies. And we've seen that. It is more or less like companies. So, can we not begin to reason, especially during this period of COVID-19? to see the helplessness of people. Even those that we rely on as leaders are helpless. Those that have been deceiving the body of Christ as helpless. Many of them were even afraid. And the same Christ that you've been preaching talks about not being afraid. At the end of this period now, you see, the usual man will never learn. Will never learn. Crusades will start again. Healing crusades, this and that. And the deception will come back again. So, brothers and sisters, when Jesus Christ said, woe unto the Pharisees and the Sadducees, what was he talking about? The 7 woes there. If you listen to, or he pointed one by one, hypocrites. You are interested in tithes, but you are not interested in the real gospel of Jesus Christ, and that is mercy, righteousness, faithfulness, standing for your faithful, defending them. Jesus Christ, when he came on, he defended his people. He stood for them. Woe betide you. He went into the temple and scattered all the money changers. He wasn't against paying taxes. He wasn't against obeying the laws. But he stood against nepotism. He stood against corruption. He stood against the ills of the day. When the widow came into the synagogue and people offered their gift, their 1/10, he raised the woman up and said she offered the best because she gave her heart. She gave her last. He said it here to woe betide you. You want to sit in front of the church. You want everybody to see you as being righteous. You preach something and do another thing. So why I decided to bring out the pastors in African continent, because I've seen that most African countries would see churches, especially where I come from, Nigeria. There are thousands of churches, hundreds of thousands of churches, hundreds of thousands of men of God. Yet, it's a devilish place in the sense that worst things happen. Worst things are happening and people are being misled. A lot of satanic churches now masquerading as men of God. We see that, yet we just want miracles. We don't even want to say the truth. We say we are children of God. We go to church. We see the bad things that are happening in the society by the government. We still stand. Sorry. And vouch for that. We see what is happening with the government of the day. Yet, the so-called Christians stand. I remember later in assembly, what's his name? Tunde Bakare, during the Jonathan government. They were they formed a group, was it Save Nigeria or so? They were protesting on the streets. But look at what is happening today in Nigeria by the Buhari government. This same so-called man of God, founder of Lutheran Assembly, where is he? Where is he? This is what is happening. Churches everywhere, yet the big churches built like empires. I mean, the real man of God. When Elijah and the prophets talked, they talked with fire. They are not scared of anybody. Jesus Christ was not afraid of anyone. Instead, our pastors today, they want to be in government committees. They want to dine and wine with the highest government official. They keep praying tell the people to pray for the government. Keep praying, keep praying, keep praying. We've been praying, but instead of you from that pulpit to thunder your support for good governance and call a spade a spade, you will never do that. You are afraid of being arrested. You are afraid of being molested. You are afraid of being locked up. Paul and Silas, they were locked up. Were they not locked up? The same Bible you read, many of us don't want to. We don't read the Bible. We just look at the pastor, our daddy in the Lord, our daddy, riding the highest jeeps and jets. I'm not here to preach against that one. But when Jesus Christ preached, what did he preach about? Who did he give succor? What did he talk about? Who were the most that were attracted to him? The rich and mighty came to him at night, sneaked in. The Nicodemus. Have you forgotten the Nicodemus? Today's pastors in Africa, they are behaving like the European preacher who came to exploit us and they brought the gospel. It is important to mark that. The same thing the Protestants talked against the Catholic Church. That is what they are doing today. The same thing, the same criticism from Martin Luther in his thesis, which he posted at the doors of Wittenberg, the same thing is happening. Every church is procuring its own doctrine, protecting its members as if they are customers, building churches for themselves and their families. Brothers and sisters, you know what I'm talking about. And that is true. What do we do? I call it the 7 woes. Woe to you, teachers of law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You yourself do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to. Many of them are not going to heaven. We know. But they don't want you to enter. They are wolves in sheep's clothing, misdirecting people with their powerful tongues. It said in Matthew chapter 23, verse 13. What did Jesus Christ preach about? Because they make people as if the gospel of Jesus Christ is something that is alien, is a white man thing. Look at what is happening in the white man's land. They don't even go to church. It's not about church. They don't even believe in Jesus Christ. It's just that hypocritical thing. It is still happening in our place. That's why we see what is happening today. That God himself is not even happy with goings on. We have churches everywhere, yet the real gospel is not being preached. After rebuking the scribes and Pharisees, Jesus himself lamented over rebellious Jerusalem. Jesus have always had the interest of people in his heart. He always criticized the authorities who put people in bondage, who brought people down, the sufferings of the people. He had always had in the crust of his heart. He said it then. The teachers of the law then and the Pharisees, they weren't really speaking about God. They weren't truly preaching the message of God. Although they acted as if they were, but they weren't. The religion was empty. And these things prevent people from seeking the true face of God. And that is what we are seeing today in the church. We are now looking at our pastors. Many of us, we are more interested in our pastors. We do whatever our pastors tell us to do. But your pastors will tell you, look, your husband is a bad person. You will just believe him immediately. Your pastor will tell you, look, don't talk to this person. You will listen to that. Your pastor will mesmerize you with the best grammar. You will be bamboozled and swept off your feet. Jesus still condemned the scribes and Pharisees for making strenuous efforts to win converts. And then they lead those converts to be twice as much, as the Bible said, children of hell as the scribes and Pharisees. If you look at Matthew chapter 13, verse 15, they are more interested in building, expanding their churches than in maintaining the truth. And that is why you see Africa today is in bondage. We talk about people criticize Jesus Christ as if he didn't preach the revolutionary gospel. His gospel was revolutionary. He always talked about the poor. He wants freedom, liberty for the people. Jesus Christ have always preached about liberty and freedom for his people. A life of abundance. Woe betide you, scribes and Pharisees. I call it the seven woes. The third woe, he pronounces against scribes and Pharisees. Call them that they are blind guides. They are blind guides and blind fools. In Matthew chapter 23, verse 16 to 17, he called them blind guides and blind fools. Can a blind man lead you to your destination? I want you to read that and see. They will never lead you to truth. And the truth is righteousness. Many of us seek the face of God in righteousness, with mercy. But no, we see that. We'll go to church today and just take our miracle. You come to church, you will live in... nobody is interested in the crimes you've committed, the people you have killed, those you have waylaid and troubled. You just get your instant miracle. Don't you think there's suspicion about that instant miracle? But because we are interested in miracle, we won't look beyond that. And you go home, the same problem will stay there, will still be there. Woe betide you, the scribes and Pharisees, for their practice of diligently paying the tithes while neglecting to actually care for the people. You heard when I read about it. Tithes. Now is an issue. It looks as if Jesus Christ did not preach a sound gospel that's all about Jesus Christ, and these same people these same pastors cover the people with their veil. Now, when you talk about the gospel, it's about tithes, paying tithes. Yet they do not care for the people. Since the COVID-19 broke out, the coronavirus pandemic, how many churches have shared to the same members of their church? How many of them? And in sharing the palliatives, what are their intentions? How many of them? They collect tithes without being interested in caring for the people. The Bible said, while they were counting their mint leaves to make sure they give 1/10 to the temple, they neglected the more important matters of the law. And that is justice, mercy, and faithfulness. They're more interested in the tithes. Tithes to expand the church, tithes to do more buildings, tithes to build universities, tithes to buy the private jet. You see someone will just open church today. In the next 6 months or 1 year, big sprawling jeep. I saw a video or sometime last year of a group of church members in Ghana. Their new church, the pastor just bought a jeep and things like that. They were demanding for, making people lose faith in the gospel. The gospel of Jesus Christ is all about truth. We must understand that. And that is why we need to look deeper. And Jesus was revolutionary. Because what he preached was against the status quo. At that time, he preached against the leaders of the day, those who considered themselves as the authorities. He preached against their lives and what they were doing. He was not afraid. He never cared whatever consequences. And at the end of the day, how did he end up? He was crucified. The Jews made sure. Have you forgotten about the high priest, Caiaphas? Caiaphas was the high priest of the Jews. They ramped up allegation against him that he called himself the king of the Jews. He never said anything, but because of what he preached against what was happening, preached for the common man. The wrong allegation against him brought him to Caiaphas, then to Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea. And he was crucified. And he was embarrassed. He was assaulted. He was insulted. How many of our pastors do? Just one criticism and they will reply you to tell you what is happening. Why I'm saying, are they revolutionary as Jesus Christ? Because they have the powers and authorities to even bring revolution to Africa. Assuming now, Nigeria as big as it is, these pastors, we have the Christian Association of Nigeria. The Christian Association of Nigeria. Can they come together and to call the government of the day what they are doing, but you still see some of them, they are calling themselves pastors. They will go and pay courtesy calls and collect brown envelopes from the monsters that is killing their faithful. That is what we. Continuing in the woes, woe betide you, the Pharisees and the scribes. In the 5th one, Jesus Christ, he tells the religious leaders that they appear clean on the outside, but they neglect the inside. All that glitters are not gold. We see that. Many of us, you see, we dress very well, wear the best robe, carry the best flashy cars. You know, when we move majestically, people will say, look, man, I want to be like this person. But inside, the person is not just like 419ers in Nigeria. In those days, they will use their last card to buy the best cars and look good, dress very well. People, when they will now go to do their local, they will easily deceive people, because people forget that all that glitters are not gold. Jesus says to clean up the outside when the inside is full of greed and self-indulgence. According to Matthew chapter 23, verse 25. The Pharisees and scribes, they are blind and do not recognize that. Brothers and sisters, you know, when the inside change automatically, the outside will change. The 6th woe, in which he calls the scribes and the Pharisees. He said they're like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. The deadness inside of tombs is likened to the hypocrisy and wickedness inside our religious leaders. We've seen now, even the so-called pastors, they fight against each other. They just appear to obey God, but their hearts are evil. They can't even stand for poor people, poor masses. Look at what is happening everywhere. In the real sense of it, when we talk about Christianity, the government of the main opposition leaders, if you read the Bible very well, are always the men of God, the prophets. They are the opposition leaders. They check the government of the day, telling them what they are supposed to do. Now, every Dick and Harry is called, they want to be pastor, because they are making money. It's a money-making, spending profession. And the last fold, he rebuked the Pharisees because they persecuted the prophets of old. Jesus said, you are just like your fathers who persecuted the prophets of old. In building monuments to the prophets, they testify against themselves, openly admitting that it was their ancestors who killed the prophets. You get to understand it more if you read Matthew chapter 23, verse 29 to 31. Although they arrogantly claim that they would not have done so, but actually their fathers did that. So hypocrisy are our pastors as revolutionary as Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ opposed kings and oppressors. He never hid. Before the high and mighty at that time, he spoke. And his prophets that followed did that. And apostles too. Many of them died horrible deaths because they stood for the gospel. To those prophets, today's prophets, how many of them are ready to challenge the status quo? All that is beautiful, all that glitters are not gold. The more you look, the less you see. Jesus Christ was divine, yet revolutionary. You can call him a rebel, but he's a rebel with a cause. It is important for pastors and men of God in the African continent to begin to look at how Jesus lived his life, how he protected the lives of the ordinary citizens, how he was vocal, how he cursed the leaders of the day for corruption, for nepotism, for ethnicity, for standing against the people. When you do that, you will return that confidence people have in God. You don't need to preach more again. That was why Christianity spread at the earliest time, because the life of Jesus Christ and the life of the early apostles were remarkable. They lived ordinary life, not ostentatious life that has marked the life cycle of our pastors today. If we do that, things will begin to change. That revolution and sanitization and reorientation that we desire so much in the continent will begin to manifest. I hope that is clear. And may God help us to understand this fully, because it's very important that we present the gospel of Jesus Christ as it should be. God bless you.